Evening. Welcome to our virtual MADIA meetup. Hope you're all safe and well. I'm Bruce Lathrop, a member of the MADIA board, and we'll be introducing our presenter. But first, I wanted to thank Brenda Traynor, Jeanette DePatty, and Brian Quant, who are helping with the meetup. Brenda will be moderating the chat discussion as she's been doing. Jeanette will be moderating live questions, and Brian will be bailing us out from any technical difficulties and posting it on YouTube. We've done introductions. I don't need to do that again. Our presenter will be answering questions after the presentation, I believe. For those unfamiliar with Zoom, you can click on the chat at any time at the bottom of the screen to enter questions, hit return to send, and Brenda will be reviewing those chat questions at the end of the presentation. Again, there'll be live questions at the end as well. Just raise your hand and Jeanette will unmute you, or you can unmute yourself, or call on you and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Before we start the presentation, I wanted to tell you a little bit about MADIA for those who aren't familiar with it. We are a 501c3 educational organization centered at the heart of San Gabriel Valley in California. Our mission is to ensure the region's technical, scientific, and industrial workforce are connected and have tools they need to be successful by having programs such as this on entrepreneurship, business finance and operations, and technology development and commercialization in settings which encourage networking and collaboration among members. Our next meeting is October 14th. The topic is kind of TBD, but hopefully we'll get that nailed down soon, and we'll send out word about what that presentation is about. If you have any feedback on this program or ideas for future programs, please send your comments and suggestions to email@madiatech.org. And after the presentation, feel free to hang out and grab your favorite refreshment, and and join us for further networking. So we'll probably finish around 8, and then we'll continue to hang out for those that want to do so. I'll now turn to introducing our presenter, who is Eric Rose. He's the founder and president of Pinnacle Product Innovations, Inc. Eric's company helps entrepreneurs and existing businesses move new products from opportunity into market reality. Services offered include market research, product development, manufacturing, sourcing, R&D project management, and IP commercialization. Eric has worked with consumer, medical, and industrial product markets and with companies including Baxter Healthcare and Mattel. Eric's background includes a BS in product design and an MBA in marketing and entrepreneurship from Pepperdine. He has over 35 years of professional experience in product development and commercialization with companies ranging from startups to Fortune 500 firms. He's a named inventor on 65 plus patents issued or pending worldwide. He's a certified new product development professional from an organization called the Product Development and Management Association. He's a part-time professor of product innovation and entrepreneurship and marketing. Has had positions with Pepperdine, Loyola Marymount, Rice University, and has been a guest lecturer for USC's Technology Commercialization course. He's currently an entrepreneur in residence at Cal State Northridge. He's also as he, I guess, mentioned earlier, is a product design expert witness in a products liability class action litigation case against a major manufacturer of personal protective equipment, or PPE. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Eric.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening and to share this talk on customer discovery and product market fit, how to create a product that the market wants. And I'll just set it up before I flip into the presentation. I find in my product innovation consulting business, particularly with entrepreneurs, that about 70%, sometimes a little more, of the customers, clients that walk in my door don't do enough market research to justify the downstream expense of research and development and intellectual property protection. And so this idea of being able to manage the product development process through doing customer discovery and product market fit is in hopes of being able to help people spend the right amount of money in the best possible way to get the biggest return and to beat the odds of numerous startups failing, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So bear with me while I share the screen, and thank you for your patience technologically. Give me one moment to flip over. And there we go. And Jeanette, if we have any glitches, please do holler. Thank you again.
Looking good.
Thank you. Looking forward to sharing this presentation with you today. So 42% of all startups that fail because the startup delivers to the market something that the market does not value. And this was published by CB Insights a few years ago. And let's break that down a little closer. While CB Insights talks about the top 20 startup failure reasons, once you get below the top 10, it's kind of noise. So I prefer really to focus on the number one reason, and that is no market need. So again, it's important that when you are planning to do a new business startup, you're working heavily on this customer discovery and product market fit, which we will talk about. One of the student groups that I worked with at Northridge, not only do they go out and do interviews, but they were over 120 interviews before they were prepared to launch. And that gave them incredible insight and high likelihood that they were going to beat the odds of this 42% of all failures fail because they had no market need. So I'd like to help you beat those odds tonight. Who am I? You heard a little bit about my background. I'm an innovation consultant, been doing consulting for 8 years now, working professionally now. This is my 40th year. I help my clients move new products from opportunity to market, an inventor, an entrepreneur, an educator, and a product designer, as well as a business person, business strategist, and just passionate about new product development and new product innovation. So at the core of this discussion, and those folks that have joined us tonight from my Inventors Meetup group, by the way, you're all welcome to join that. It's complimentary. Inventors Mastermind SoCal Meetup, the largest Inventors Meetup group in Los Angeles. This is one of the core philosophies that I bring to that group, to my clients, to my students, and to this discussion tonight. And that is that I believe fundamentally there are 3 keys to successful new products. First, you want to start with the fundamental marketability of the product. What's the business case? What's wrong with the world today? What's the anguish in the market that's not being fulfilled by something that's out there? When you have a deep understanding of that opportunity and the finance, the math, the business model canvas of that opportunity, then it makes sense to move into what I call the technical feasibility. So can you design, develop, and manufacture the product at a cost low enough where everybody in the distribution channel will make the margin that they expect? Now, if you've got the business case and you can technically execute against it, you want to move into the protectability, where you would call Bruce, for example, and make sure to have a blanket of intellectual property. Everything from design patents, utility patents, trademark, copyright, trade dress, addressing trade secret. It doesn't mean that you don't look at prior art during the marketability, but it doesn't make sense to spend $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 on intellectual property protection if you don't understand that the market wants it and that you can technically execute against it. And protectability can also mean the ability to have things like supply chain exclusivity so you can lock out competition. So this is at the core. We're going to dig deep tonight into number 1, the marketability, and talk about how to manage that. We're going to do that with this philosophy, customer discovery and product market fit. And I'll talk a little more about where that came from in a moment. But first, I want to give you the overview of how I see this. First of all, in customer discovery, we're talking about finding the right users, So you have a vision for who's going to use your product, and there may be multiple vertical markets that could potentially use your product. You'll want to look at how to segment the market, how to identify who those people are, what their personas are. We're going to talk a little more about that. You'll want to create an interview guide. And again, we're going to talk in detail about all of these. You'll want to do the interviews. Once you've collected this market research, then you want to start moving into interpreting that research and taking action upon it. So first you're going to interpret the results. We'll talk about how to do that, looking for consistency and persistency. You'll create the detailed insights, which will then drive a product description. And then ultimately, when you're in product development, you'll have to manage the trade-offs that are inevitable in the R&D process. So I want to give acknowledgments first to Steve Blank, who really coined this term, the lean startup. And you'll all be able to get this deck, and Bruce will get this all to everybody. And you'll have all of this information as well as the bonus content in the back that I won't be sharing tonight. But Steve Blank is a Stanford professor who came up with the idea of this customer discovery and product market fit. And we're going to hear a little bit from him in a video, one of the videos tonight. One of Steve Blank's proteges, Eric Ries, wrote the book called The Lean Startup. I highly recommend it if you plan to be in the startup business. You can find out more about it at theleanstartup.com. And when I was teaching my course in product and business design at Loyola Marymount University, one of the required readings, or in this case viewings, was this course available. It actually says Udemy here, but it's through Udacity, my error. Udacity, you'll have the URL and you can watch. The first 2 to 3 hours of the course are particularly valuable and free. You just have to sign up for a free account. So customer discovery. Let's play this video. I'm going to try to flip over here. Bear with me for one moment. And that didn't work. And let's do it from here. And Jeanette, if you could confirm that I've got full screen running, that'd be great.
We're not seeing your video. We're still seeing your deck. We're seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay, one moment, please. I'm going to stop the share.
Yeah.
Flip the share over. Share it out again. And now, Jeanette?
Yeah.
Thank you. Here we go.
Let's take a look at the first step of customer discovery. You're going to be living this for the next couple of weeks if you're doing this for real. Phase one is you state your hypotheses and you draw the business model canvas. And again, you put the canvas on the wall, you and your team get around and put up yellow stickies. But the next step is you get out of the building. You're going to test the problem. You're going to test your understanding of the customer's problem or need, and you're going to figure out how to build the prototype. The next thing is you're going to test the solution. You're going to test the solution if you're on the web by building a low fidelity and then a high fidelity prototype. And you're going to again test your understanding of the customer's needs and whether your solution matches it. And this match, again, is called product market fit. That's the holy grail for entrepreneurs. Am I building something that people can't get enough of or are just willing to open up their wallets and empty it in front of you to get their hands on? And the fourth phase in customer discovery is you verify or pivot. Do people agree that you're solving a high-value problem or need? And do you understand your business model enough to start test selling, which is the next step in customer validation? Now, what's really depressing to most entrepreneurs is the answer most often the first time you go through this is heck no. You know, and what's worse is, well, they kind of sort of like, well, kind of sort of is not a startup. Kind of sort of is people have been nice to you. The only time you know that you have something that's worth investing your time and money in is if people are literally trying to force their money on you or can't use your product even in its buggy, uninitialized form enough. This is what you're looking for. And if you haven't found it yet, that's why the customer development process is an iterative circle. It assumes you will be going through this multiple times. And when you finally think you do have something that matches customer needs, you get to the next step, which is customer validation.
All right, let's flip back over.
You're going to be an expert at this by the end of this deal.
I taught on Zoom last year, all year, and it's tricky for sure.
Yeah.
And from the current slide, and slide down. So what you heard from Steve Blank is that he wants you to go out and get out of the office, so to speak, which of course is very difficult now, but fortunately we have Zoom. Find the right users, first of all, and then be able to ask these users what it is that they're looking for. And there are certain ways that I prescribe you should do that in order to make that process of customer discovery more manageable. So let me share that with you. First thing you need to do is find the right users. So again, you might have multiple verticals. I had one client who had a beach shelter, and some of the folks that he was looking at that might be customers were the surfer dudes who would come out in the morning and after work and leave their car keys on their tire, and they wanted, certain features in the product. Other folks were stay-at-home moms who would go to the beach during the week and take the kids with, and then other were full families that would go out to the beach on the weekend. And he needed to understand who these people were, what their personas were, where they resided, how could he interview them, and what the set of questions were that would best characterize what their needs were. So identifying the demographics and the personas, the first step. You want to talk to your near-term customers because you want that cash flow as soon as possible, and then long-term customers, people that might be enterprise, for example, corporate, commercial customers as well. So think about that stream of near-term, long-term, and then you have a wide variety of stakeholders, what I call stakeholders, where they're not just customers, they may be key opinion leaders. So for example, if there's a blogger who's an expert, or a doctor who's an expert in certain, let's say, pulmonology, they wouldn't necessarily buy the product, but they might specify it. Retailers and distributors who will touch your product from manufacturer into the customer's hands, those are important. If you have shareholders that are funding your venture, they may be important for you to understand what value they can bring to it. And if you already have a venture and you have a sustaining business, and you're looking to develop a new product or an ancillary market or a side business, you may find that those internal stakeholders, such as customer service, repair, service and warranty, etc., all those folks may be of value to you as you start doing interviewing to determine what your next new product is going to be. I want to tell you a little story about this particular success. This product is called Go Speak. The story is on my website, ericpaulrose.com, Success Stories. The products on the left, those are remote controls for digital projectors. And this company in Camarillo was a manufacturer of OEM, remote controls for digital projectors, and trying to get into the branded product offering. So their customers were digital projector manufacturers like Sony, Hitachi, Mitsubishi, and Focus. And they wanted to understand how to expand. And what I helped them to do is to look at a broader perspective of who their customers were. I asked them, who are your customers? To which they said, well, digital projector manufacturers. And I said, no, those are your direct customers, but the end users, your indirect customers, are actually people who present. They could be teachers, trainers, road warriors, advertising executives, keynote speakers. It's those folks that are already using the remote control that you want to understand what other product they may value from you. From that discussion, I found the National Speakers Association, created an advisory panel, did market research at one of their trade shows, met with a dozen professionals in the business, found about 5 or 6 great new product ideas. One of them stood head and shoulders above the other, which was a portable PA device. And these people in the room that were professional speakers and presenters, said, look, we can never rely on the portable audio when we go to a venue. Sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it's too small, sometimes it's too big, sometimes we don't have the right adapters or connectors. We want to control our own destiny. And Eric, we think this thing should fold up like a laptop, fit in the overhead compartment of an airplane, and come with a little wireless mic and sell for under $1,000. If you had that, we would buy it tomorrow. I took that back to the CEO of the company, to which he said, we don't know how to do that. We make radio frequency and infrared remote controls. To which I said, you don't need to know how to make it. We just need a strategic partner. Searched the world, found one company in UK, a better company in Chicago. The company in Chicago did the design, the development, and in their factory in China did the manufacturing, delivered finished goods to the Camarillo warehouse. This $35,000 investment in R&D and capital equipment has generated multi-millions of dollars of revenue, and the product is still in market today, 13 years later, on its third generation design. The point in this story is that you want to find users that have needs without regard to the fact that it's exactly what you know how to do or exactly what you can do today. Because if you find a market opportunity, then I challenge you to find a way to execute against it without regard to whether you have that knowledge or capability today. So now that you found the right users and you find they have this problem, they have an anguish, they have a need, what do? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to create an interview guide before you actually interview them. And here's an example of even Jimmy Fallon, who uses an interview guide. And you want to create what I call non-leading questions. Bruce, you'll appreciate this. You don't want to lead the witness, right? So it's important that you ask discovery questions. We're going to talk more about that. And not say, you like my idea, don't you? No, it's more about when you have a problem with X, what kind of problems exactly do you have? What goes wrong? Why is it a problem? What do you do to get around the problem? All of these non-leading questions. Is there anything you try now to make it work? We're going to talk more about that. So the interview guide, the series of questions that you're going to have, should be around 20 to 40 minutes, depending on how much time you think you'll get from people that you're interviewing. I recommend that you have 2 people present during the interview. We'll talk more about that. And you can capture this through Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics. And you can have the interview guide digitally and have a second person fill it out while you do the interviewing. We'll talk more about that. So what are you going to ask? What are your biggest pains? Do you do anything to hack, to cobble together a solution, because there isn't anything to get over the problem, the anguish that you have now? Because there isn't anything, do you lose time? Do you lose money? Do you lose business? Those are discovery questions you really want to understand, because if you can quantify them, that will help discover how big the problem is and how much you can charge for the solution that you may ultimately offer the market. You might ask a question like, if there's any one thing about the solution that you offer, that you're using today that you'd want to change, what one thing might you offer to me that would be very important to have in a new product, a new solution that would make your life better? What do you like most about what it is that you're using now? What is it that you like least in the solution that you have now? So you're looking for items of value. What do they value the most? Is it economic? Is it other things? Are there soft costs? Whatever it might be, their values, other benefits. You might ask where they expect to buy a product like this. How might they expect to buy the product? Online, retail, both, through omni-channel distribution? Get a deeper understanding of the distribution that they expect your product to have. And I always say, never let a lead die. So if you're in front of somebody who is an appropriate user for your product that you're interviewing, you want to ask if they know of anyone else that actually will also potentially be interested in the product. And if, of course, there are specific other questions tailored to what your new product's value proposition is, you want to try to include those as well. So we're going to jump into this video. Bear with me while I make that happen.
You're good. You're good.
Thank you.
Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You ready to buy a computer from me? All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Let me flip back over. Thank you. So it's important as you do the market research and create the interview guide, you are asking for questions. You're asking questions about why. And we're going to talk more about that. So when you do these interviews, I want you to create in your mind a three-phase process. This is not something Steve Blank teaches. I've not seen anyone teach this before, but I find this to be very productive with my clients. It also helps, and Bruce, you'll appreciate this, it helps to manage having to do or not do a non-disclosure agreement. When you first start this research, you're going to do pure anguish discovery. You're not selling, you're not disclosing your idea. All you're trying to do is discover the anguish. So for example, if someone lives in a home where they're in the wildland-urban interface and they have to evacuate, you want to understand their anguish. You want to understand what they go through. You want to understand the costs. Costs out of pocket, costs emotionally, anxiety, etc., etc. You want to understand that anguish. You want to do that without ever disclosing anything about what your intent is for an offer. And when I say an offer, it could be product and or service. The second phase, after you've collected this research, is what I call an oral hypothesis. You're not disclosing in any detail what your idea is. You're not showing a virtual prototype or a physical prototype. You're saying, what if there was a solution that allowed you to leave your home comfortably and yet know that your home had fire protection for a period of time under most conditions, certainly as it might relate to embers falling, maybe not a fire-nado, but if there were embers falling in the neighborhood, there was a product that you could have confidence that would prevent your home from burning and may even notify you of how things are going in your neighborhood. Would you find that of value? Oh my gosh, I would love something like that. What might you pay for it? And that's a tough one to ask that question, but you're testing these, what I call oral hypotheses about what the offer is, what might they pay, how might they buy it, what if the system had an annual maintenance program, all of the things around it without disclosing your idea. Now you get to phase 3. You're going to be testing a prototype, physical, virtual, whatever. Now you need to go under a non-disclosure because you want to ensure that this information is confidential and kept confidential and protect all of your intellectual property rights. And you'll keep a record of what it is that you disclosed and to whom you disclosed it so that you can protect your intellectual property. Now you're showing a prototype, and even at some point downstream you may be selling a beta. We could talk more about that. But I want you to keep this in mind because this is a process that I find very workable, very manageable, and people that you interview, it's often difficult to get them to sign a non-disclosure, and this is a way to get a lot of information without having to go under non-disclosure. And you may find phase 1 and phase 2, your product doesn't make it through. And therefore you need to end the project before you spend a ton of money. And certainly then you don't have to worry about building a prototype if you manage it this way. We're going to skip this because we're a little short on time, but when you get this deck, you'll have the URL and you'll be able to understand this concept of ethnography, which is observational research, and how important it is during your market research, customer discovery, product market fit. So when you're doing the interviews, ideally, you're doing the interviews in the user's environment. So we talked a little bit about this residential external fire suppression system, and I went out into people's homes and understood their neighborhood, understood their evacuation plans, understood their anguish, the family's anguish, maybe the husband and wife and the kids, even the fact that there was a pet running around. All of that was important to understand so that I could get this deep, immersed feeling into what was going on. Ideally, you'd capture this through video. So you've got one person who's doing the interviewing, one person who's doing video. But if that's not practical, maybe there's an audio recording or maybe there's a scribe. We talked earlier about having the questions, let's say on a tablet that's on a Google Doc, a Google form, whatever, or SurveyMonkey, and the second person who's not encumbered by, and I use that word lightly, but really not focused on the interface in the person that you're interviewing, looking for nonverbal cues, listening carefully. The primary interviewer needs to be focused on the person he's interviewing, not scribing. And the scribe needs to be focused on scribing and not worrying about those nonverbal cues, etc., from the person that's being interviewed. So having two people do the research is what I'm trying to get at, and that's very important. Around 10 questions, kind of depends on how the questions branch, and ultimately somewhere 20 to 40 minutes depending on how much time you've got available. Ideally, you don't have to pay for the interview. Sometimes you will. Sometimes it'll be cash, gift card, Starbucks card, etc. Once you've done the interviewing, and we can have more questions, we can have questions at the end, product market fit is the next step. So again, you're trying to get all of this data from the market and figure out what does that mean to your offer being product and or service. So you're looking for the big pains. You're looking for people really complaining about things. You're looking for those deep insights. You're looking for persistence. I would buy that thing tomorrow if you had it. That's persistence. And you're looking for consistency. And if you get consistent responses, let's say 80% of the people that you interview are saying the same thing. I have a kitchen gadget that I've invented and patented, and 95% of the people that I interviewed about how to use a whisk and what they like and don't like about a whisk told me the same thing. They said the number one thing they hate about a whisk is cleaning it. And that consistent set of responses was exactly what I was looking for that allowed me to go forward and build a prototype. So you're looking for both persistence, I would buy it tomorrow, and consistent responses that say, look, I and everyone else I've interviewed, 80% plus, would say the same thing, and they would want this product with this set of features. I won't get into the details of this, but I want you to read it offline. It's differentiating the values, benefits, and features. Features, the product has a handle. Benefit, the product is portable and easy to carry. Value, when the product is portable and easy to carry, I feel free and can go about my life unencumbered and travel anywhere I want to go, as an example. So when you're doing the research, I want you to focus on trying to prioritize the benefits, because it's important that once you prioritize the benefits, you'll spin that into prioritizing the feature set, a handle versus easy to carry. Once you've prioritized them and you really understand that priority of the pain that your people you're interviewing have, now you can start ranking these, which will allow you to rank the feature set, which will allow you to manage the trade-offs during new product development. And there are a number of tools. We won't get into all of them tonight, but you can rank them by force ranking, using a weighting technique, conjoint analysis, and other methods as well. So again, summarizing, you want persistent and consistent responses. You want to understand the values, benefits, and features. You want to look at how to rank these, particularly in light of how do you move from a product concept to cash in your pocket because you've offered the market something in the shortest path. And so there's lots of ways to be able to manage the trade-offs during product development to get there. You want to look at business strategy fit. I worked in one category in the housewares field where there's a product that there was a client who had a product trying to get into the market, and it was a metal-based product, and he was trying to pitch it to license in the plastics housewares industry, people that were manufacturing plastic products for the home, and it was just a mismatch, and that's not what you want to do. And ultimately, at the end, you want to make sure you're managing these trade-offs. I'm going to show you something about that. And that is this. This is something I published an article on a number of years ago called the NPD Project Pentagon. If this strikes your fancy, you can send me an email. I put my email in the chat, and I'll give you the link on my website to download this from my publications page. This article is about managing the 5 key trade-offs that are inevitable during product development. It's the feature set, product cost, capital equipment cost, development engineering cost, and the schedule. So when I was working at Mattel Toys, we used to say, Christmas is king. There's no such thing as being late to Christmas, and therefore schedule is everything. On the other hand, if you're working in the medical device industry like I have, the feature set, in other words, it has to be safe and effective, is king. And schedule, honestly, is irrelevant. So when you're doing your research and you're prioritizing what's important to the people you're interviewing, you want to do it in this light so that you know if they say, look, this is something I would only ever buy at Christmas, then schedule is king. Or, look, I would never pay more than $19.99 for this at retail. Well, then product cost is important because you know you have a markup of 3 to 4 times manufacturing cost, maybe 5 times manufacturing cost to get to retail. And product cost is king. And so managing around the NPD Project Pentagon becomes critical during development. And here's an example. I just want to make sure you understand. In this article, I published this idea of a fictitious product with a base set of features that might have a manufacturing cost of $1 for the base product, 5 potential accessory items or ancillary features, if you will, listed here, and what the product cost is and the percent of total product cost. And you can see item number 4, in this case the status display, is 32% of the product cost if everything was included, and it really wasn't important to the market. So by cutting out that feature, item number 4, because you found out through your customer discovery and product market fit, people really didn't care about a status display, let's say an LCD or an LED display, you could cut that out and either lower the price point, increase the profit margin, or both. So this is how you manage the trade-offs during development, and you're doing this in light of the customer discovery and product market fit research that you did.
Hey, Eric, you got about 5 minutes left.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So one of the methods is conjoint analysis. You can watch this video, not going to cover it here. Another one is Cano. Again, it's a particular methodology. The video is available. Watch it at your leisure. Same thing with QFD, quality function deployment, prioritizing features. And as a wrap-up, this is what I want you to remember. It's really looking at, first, doing the customer discovery, that is, that tough market research, finding the right users, creating the interview guide, doing the interviews, moving into product market fit, interpreting the results, creating the insights. Those insights drive what your product specification is, then managing the new product development process so that you have what I call fidelity between the customer's insights from the market and what it is you develop and ultimately put into the market. I want to thank you for sitting through the presentation this evening, creating a product the market wants, customer discovery and product market fit. My business offers market research, product development, manufacturing sourcing, IP commercialization. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And we're going to open it for questions. And I'm going
We have
to
a couple
stop
questions
share.
from the chat, so and the rest of you, if you want to ask questions live, just put that little green check mark next to your name, and then I'll know that you want to ask a question.
I'm going to jump over to the chat. We have a question from Brian. The interview process is now much more difficult due to COVID. Any pointers? The answer is yes. I have my clients now well schooled in doing interviews on Zoom. It's so very important to use an interview guide while you're doing these interviews, even with Zoom. And ideally, you do have a second person with you on Zoom who's doing the scribing. And if you can, ask the people that you're interviewing on Zoom in advance if you can record. I will tell you that when I was developing that portable PA system, the Go Speak, and I was using a digital audio recorder in the room on the focus group doing the research, I played that audio recording back several times. And when you play it back, it's like watching a movie, you know, in the theater 2 or 3 times, and you hear things you don't necessarily hear the first time. So I would argue, you know, the default of Zoom is actually advantageous because people don't have to travel, you or the other person, and that you can get the recording. So I love that. Next question, Eric, what are the key differences between developing a new product and developing a new service? So obviously with a physical product, there's no capital equipment, tooling, etc. But you still have the fundamental questions, this customer discovery and product market fit. So if they already are using a service, whatever that service might be, you want to understand what's wrong with what service they're using today. What doesn't it have? Is there something that isn't complete? Is there a pricing feature that's not quite value add? Maybe the service is bundled and you really don't want to bundle. You want to unbundle the service and have a lower price point because you only need a certain portion of what's being bundled, and you're forced into being having to buy a complete bundled service. So it's about asking those discovery and anguish questions. And generally what I find is about 3 to 5 of the first interviews, no matter whether it's physical product or service, you tend to throw those interviews out because the questions themselves end up getting tweaked, because you don't really know what you don't know when you're asking those questions initially. And after the first 3 to 5 interviews, you tweak those questions and you get much better questions and answers. Eric, do you have students looking for projects? I don't at the moment, because Cal State Northridge canceled the work that I was doing with them, the incubator, and completely canceled it. But if you have a particular need, whoever answered that question, please let me know. Reach out to me, and whatever it is. If you've got students, I do have periodic projects for students. In fact, I sent a message to a former student who's now on her own as an entrepreneur and also doing some freelance consulting, because I never know what kind of research my clients need, and sometimes it's simple research students can do. Another question here. What do you think about the medical diagnostic market? Well, I think it's awesome. I will tell you, since COVID, my business is better than ever. I have a lot of PPE clients, but I've got even one prospective client in the enterprise building maintenance, and they're reimagining what their offer is beyond service to offer potentially products. There's the whole issue of diagnostics, and what are diagnostics? Diagnostics are not just machines that sit in a lab anymore. More and more, the medical diagnostic market is moving into the home, certainly moving into the doctor's office, and trying to speed up diagnostics is at the core of that. So I definitely recommend whatever can be looked at in that market, but a lot of it is technology development, which can be tricky, and of course has FDA requirements, which can also be quite laborious. Eric, do you have suggestions or a guideline for the questionnaire development? I do, and when you get the deck, there's actually a couple links inside the deck on how to build the right questionnaire. If you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Eric, I have a question.
Sure, Jeanette.
How does design thinking come into your approach? I mean, you mentioned lean startup and agile, and those are some things that are a little more legacy systems, and I think design thinking is a little newer, although it borrows heavily from those. What's your feeling about that?
I've studied design thinking. I know people who teach design thinking. I haven't found it to be particularly advantageous in my business.
Mm-hmm.
I think I am a designer fundamentally, first and foremost. And so, my philosophy is it's about being empathetic and understanding the anguish before you move into any type of design work.
Mm-hmm.
What I find is 70, maybe 80% of the people who are working to solve a problem jump into the physical embodiment and the creation of a product before they deeply study the anguish, being empathetic, brainstorming numerous options, and then going through a design process to cull down what solutions might be the best ones to go from concept to cash. And that design methodology is a much preferred way to go, rather than what I call ready, fire, aim,
Mm-hmm.
which I get a lot of.
And what about ugly prototyping? Do you have any tips for ugly prototyping?
I call it cut and cobble model.
Yeah.
Some people call it the Home Depot approach. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I definitely recommend it. But I don't recommend spending too much time or money building a prototype without going through the process I discussed tonight. But I certainly understand, especially being a designer engineer, sometimes we think with our hands, and it may require the building of a prototype to even, or making a sketch, before we can even understand how to ask the right questions. I just don't recommend spending thousands of dollars doing it.
So I'll throw a little twist on that.
Please.
I actually completely agree with this. It's like, I think interviewing folks out as to what they're looking for and your idea relative to what they're looking for, I think is extremely important. I think the other significant part of that is the testing process. As an engineer out there, to me, it's test this in its minimalist form, least amount of engineering effort towards it. The problem I kind of run into as an entrepreneur, though, is we in the market on funding today want an MVP. We're not satisfied with a proof of concept or I wouldn't call it, I guess a pre-proof of concept or just a marketing test. What about on the funding side of that? How can we convince investors out there that $20,000 to do a simple test or a simple proof of concept versus having something already at MVP ready to sell?
So I have a document, feel free to reach out to me and I'll email it to you, called the Venture Value Continuum. And it's a one sheet that discusses when a venture capitalist looks at where you are, there is this continuum of where your development process is and how they value your venture. At one end of the spectrum, it's a head scratch. Oh, I got an idea. I want $100,000. It's not going to happen. The other end of the spectrum, it's a commercialized product with repeat sales, with patents that are granted. And there's everything in between. And so when a VC looks at, I just finished a VC boot camp from Techstars. What an eye-opener. When a VC looks at where you are, their comfort level in investing and the amount of money that they invest will likely, no guarantees in anything, but likely be higher the further along that spectrum you are. So I would argue, generally speaking, you're not going to get money to build a prototype from a VC. You're going to get it from friends and family and from your own pocketbook. Once you've got some type of a working prototype and some clear understanding of what the market values through this work that we talked about tonight, customer discovery, product market fit, phase 3, where you have a prototype and you're doing the research around that, now you may get money from a venture capitalist to take it to that first MVP product in market, where a VC will say, oh, okay, you have a working prototype, you have patents filed, you've done your customer discovery, product market fit, you have people who have maybe letters of intent willing to buy when the MVP is available. Okay, I'll give you $100,000 to tool up. So that's my thinking, if that answered your question, Brian.
The question I have is kind of along the same lines, is of all the people you've assisted, how often is it building a business around an idea versus I got an idea and I just want to license it? I want to.
More often than not, it's licensing.
Is it? Okay, because I often say, the ultimate way, the best way to monetize something is to build a business, and then you're not only selling the product, but you're selling the people that came up with it and the marketing effort and all that.
So I have one of my clients, Patty knows from our group. He has an automotive accessory that is a scrape guard that goes under the front edge of a bumper. And oh, by the way, he's got a company that does automotive accessory work, particularly wrapping film on cars. So he already has a distribution channel to sell these scrape guards and build market traction So he's done design with me, development, intellectual property protection. I helped him do some manufacturing sourcing. He's now in production. He's commercialized through a marketing agency, Facebook ads, and so forth. He's selling product direct, and he's installing in his Van Nuys business, and he's getting testimonials and so forth. And now when he's licensing, as you described, Bruce, the entire venture, not just the idea. The other end of the spectrum, I've got a spine surgeon client who's designed, developed and prototyped and patented a home-based traction device for people's spinal health, and all he wants to do is license. He doesn't want to build a business. So, anywhere along the spectrum is possible.
Yeah, because kind of a related point is partnering. I'm a member of Passing the Angels, so when someone comes, sometimes I don't see it immediately. The light bulb goes off, and I realize there's only one person here. He doesn't have a partner. He's just a founder. There's no co-founder, and that's to me.
You will see in my venture value continuum, one of those bullet points that adds value to the venture is it says you've built a team with appropriate subject matter experts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Plus it shows you convinced at least one other person that you're not a nutcase.
Right. And I get, a lot of people that say this is the best thing since sliced bread. Justine, you've had your hand up, so to speak, for a bit. And how can I answer a question for you?
My question kind of goes back to the questionnaire thing again. I thought you had mentioned that we should use like a SurveyMonkey or Google Docs. Is that in recording the interview, or do we send it out ahead of time?
No.
Okay.
So thank you for that clarity. I get that with my students a lot too. It's not about sending out a SurveyMonkey and hoping for the best. SurveyMonkeys, where you send out that survey and hope for the best, are great at being able to answer, let's say 1,000 people, should the product be pink or blue, green or gray. But it's not about reading the nonverbal cues that you need when you're discovering anguish. It's not about building the empathy for the people who are evacuating their homes, or in the kitchen with a messy whisk, right? Yep. So the SurveyMonkey just allows you the mechanism to capture it, let's say on a tablet or somebody else in the background on Zoom, so that you can quantify, statistically capture, do the analytics on questions that might be, is it A or B? Is it A, B, or C? Is it yes or no? But then there's going to be a whole lot of qualitative, soft, kind of intuitive questioning that you want to capture as well.
Okay.
Another question we have, do I use Pear Deck? I don't know what Pear Deck is. Jay, Kenny, if you could elaborate on that. Patty, what do you think about Kickstarter or other crowdfunding as opposed to VC, especially if it is lower cost? So I've done a talk on Kickstarter several times. It's called Project Managing Your Crowdfunding Campaign. I did it in Pasadena a couple times to the Project Management Institute. I think I've done it to my inventors meetup group once. Here's my story about crowdfunding. Because a couple of my clients have done crowdfunding and it's been not fun. My story is proper prior planning prevents poor performance. I find a majority, in fact, statistics show over 75% of all physical product crowdfunding campaigns deliver late. And they deliver late because they don't properly plan all the product development steps, including getting quotations for downstream manufacturing, tooling, inventory, inbound freight, all of those steps. They don't adequately plan for the cost of tooling. So they go to crowdfunding, like one of my clients in the camera accessory industry. They went to crowdfunding with a prototype that could never be mass produced. So by the time I got involved, the industrial design firm brought me in. I was like, wait a minute, you could never actually produce this in a mass production environment. We have to engineer it. Oh, I didn't understand that. So that's going to cost time and money to do the engineering. We're going to have multiple quotes for production so that we could really understand what the product cost is going to be, not just what somebody estimated it could be. Oh, I didn't understand that. So I recommend that before you go live in crowdfunding, you have what I call a reasonable leap of faith. You're about 80% there in terms of development. And so that reasonable leap of faith between where you are in design and engineering versus where you want to be commercializing. So one of my clients actually spent his own money to build tooling and have a pilot run done before he was going to go crowdfunding. But I don't necessarily recommend it, but I do recommend you get at least 3 quotes for manufacturing, product cost, tooling, both in terms of capital equipment, piece part price, and schedules. And you bake that into your crowdfunding campaign. So when you tell your backers, the people who are giving you money, it's going to be 6 months, you know it's not going to be 9 months. Last thing you want to do is tell them 6 months and end up with 9 months. Because what's happening now in crowdfunding more and more and more, they're class action suits where the backers are suing the creator for breach of contract because they said it was going to be 6 months. And you don't deliver in 6 months. And you don't deliver in 7 months. And oh, by the way, by the time you deliver in 9 months, the product isn't quite the same because you hadn't worked the bugs out. Proper prior planning prevents poor performance.
Thank you, Eric.
Any other questions? I know we hit our time limit.
Yeah, so we can obviously, if you're able to hang out in our after hours, you can answer more questions, and we can all go run and grab our favorite refreshment. I deliberately didn't bring it in advance because otherwise start early, so I have to. So let's
I'm gonna go off screen for just a moment, and then I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. So everybody, yeah. So thanks for coming. If you're going to drop off, otherwise, please stick around and join us for your favorite.
And just to confirm, Bruce, anybody who's here, you've got their email, can mail out the deck, correct?
Yes, and I can mail it to everybody if that's okay.
Yes, that'd be great. Thanks. Be right back.
Okay. I will be back.